opposition's behalf. She's writing letters to Benjamin Netanyahu, begging for his support. She's out here just being a complete fool, so much so to the point that yesterday during the voting process, she went and voted and went to go shake the hand of one of the Venezuelan soldiers in front of all the cameras. The Venezuelan soldier looked at her, put her hand in her pocket, and turned around because, of course, the dignified Venezuelan patriots would never, ever, ever shake hands with someone who called on the U.S. military to invade their own country. I mean, it's insane. I guess, we can talk more about what's going on, but just as a final point about these elections and what's really happening, you look at the direction that Argentina has recently gone, and of course, this Javier Milei, he's a very charismatic, funny guy. But what's not funny is that he sold his country out to the International Monetary Fund. He's destroying his country with inflation and debt that he's taken on from these major, transnational banking and monetary institutions. And it's absolutely destroying his country. You look at President Maduro, who's come under 936 sanctions by the United States. Venezuela's come under 930 plus sanctions. What has Venezuela done? What has Maduro done? He's been able to take inflation from 36,000% all the way down to 90%. Last year, inflation was about 4 to 5%, which was the lowest it's been in like 20 years or something. In addition to that, Venezuela is 100% food sovereign, meaning all the food they produce is eaten by the Venezuelans, and all the food here, it's like 97% of the food that Venezuelans eat is actually grown in Venezuela. They had to do this because of sanctions. They also did the CLAP program, which provided food and care packages to millions and millions of homes in Venezuela because the people were suffering as a result of the sanctions. So, I think this is all good. I don't think Venezuela should sell their oil to transnational corporations. Before the socialist revolution, 99% of revenue generated from oil in this country went out of the country. Venezuela provided 80% of oil to the UK during World War II. Obviously, Venezuela is very important to the West. That's why they're trying to protect their resources and their sovereignty, and I fully stand with them.
Jackson, just a quick question. There are reports, not reports, a lot of evidence to suggest that she is funded significantly by the US. We're seeing on social media protests that are being perpetuated to such a level where there seems to be, one would say, an attempt to cause a colour revolution in the country because you basically propagate small protests enough on media to the point where it basically caught, and a lot of this is artificial, what the other side would believe is artificial, backed by Western powers. Is that what people are seeing, and is that why Maduro came out and made them comments about Elon Musk? Like, what's your thoughts on that? I know Elon Musk did retweet a couple of posts that end up being fake news. One was about like ballots being stolen, which ended up being like air conditioners, and the other one was about the percentage of the election, where in reality they did add up to 100%, but they were like, oh, it added up to 108%. So when you've got this information, what's the thoughts on the ground? Because I know you were asked to observe elections, and that's why you were asked in Venezuela, right?
Yeah, so I was observing elections, and I was with international observers and domestic observers. In fact, there was someone a young girl from the opposition, who was a part of my election observing team, and I got to talk to her, and she was telling me all day that, she thought that the opposition was going to win, and then by around like 6, she was in tears crying, so, I guess someone may have misled her. But ultimately, there was a lot of misinformation. I mean, Elon Musk, Vice Grad, and In Wokeness, all these accounts, they're sharing. Okay, so what are the biggest lies we saw? First of all, Vice Grad shared the story that they were shutting down the polling station. Okay, that specific polling station that they shared in the video was actually shut down by the opposition. It was several hundred opposition that came over and shut down the polling station, which I thought was hilarious. It's obvious obviously not hilarious, though, that your post received millions and millions of views and misled a bunch of people. Elon Musk shared the post about the ballot boxes being stolen. Those were air conditioning units, not ballot boxes. More propaganda. The supermarket, the grocery store photo of that thing was hilarious too. You know, ultimately, Jimmy Carter, he said that Venezuela has the best elections he's seen in the world. He said that in 2012, Venezuela has improved their elections since then. I mean, in America, our elections are stolen. Everyone knows that our elections are fraudulent, they're stolen. Trump had the election stolen from him. In Venezuela, they have like fingerprint ID, they have ID verification, they have 16 audits on, I think it's like 16 audits on a certain percentage of the polling stations, and the opposition is allowed to participate in all those. 54% have triple audits, which the opposition, of course, participates in. And Maduro has always done this at the behest of the West. So the West says, you know, please allow the opposition to come in and look at all the ballots, look at the ballot centers and the records and the sheets and everything. And he says, okay. The West says, we're going to send in people to come and look at the elections. He says, okay. You know, it's like, why? My question is, why does anyone have any, you know, concerns about these elections when they're probably the most secured and surveilled elections on the face of the earth? And it was actually pretty close. I mean, it was like, what, 7%, 6% of the vote? That's a pretty damn close election. You know, it's not like Bashar al-Assad or Putin where they received 99% of the vote. This is pretty close. And, you know, it's just how it ended. They lost. You know,
Just for the audience, the percentages were 51.2% to Maduro, 44.2% to the opposition. And then there was a graphic going around which claimed that the percentages added up to 108, but in reality what that was is 4.6% for the remaining people who were standing. But what people did was add the 4.6% individually and be like, oh, it adds up to 108%. So that was another fake news that was peddled. Now, one last question, Jackson, and then obviously do jump in whatever you want, because I know you're on the ground in Venezuela.
Well, not necessarily. I think we should go to some different perspectives.
Yeah, just one more question.
One more.
Yeah.
One more.
Jackson,
One more.
bro, I'm gonna drop you if you can't control yourself.
No, you're not this time, buddy. Not this time.
Yeah. Piotr, calm down. You're just embarrassing yourself.
Not this time.
Piotr,
No, este tiempo no. Unfortunatamente, Solomon is no posible para ti.
I don't know what this guy's doing. Right, okay, Jackson.
El nombre, el idioma es español, tú no conoces.
Well,
¿No entiendes? Interesante. Okay, vamos.
Alright, guys, enough of this fighting. Come on, we're not in high school anymore.
exactly.
I know, it's a bit of fun. It's a bit of fun to make this space spicy.
Oh, let's get more fun then. Alright,
It's meant to be a professional space. Right, Jackson.
Go on then.
Right, okay. Right, okay, so Jackson, one other question I had, and then we'll go to some of the people, is there is a lot of reports, Fraser reported on this, many other people reported on this, and they basically said that the opposition, Maria, she was backed by the CIA. You mentioned it briefly. You want to expand on that as well, just for the audience so they have a perspective on that, where she was backed by them, and there was this attempted U.S. intervention into Venezuelan politics?
Well, it's nothing new. I mean, like I said, after the region won its independence, blah blah blah. This is like everyone knows the story. Simon Bolivar, but of course, neoliberal capitalists eventually took control of the region and its resources. And then the revolution came, and Chavez came to power, and they began to nationalize a lot of the resources, take it back from the people. Since then, the West has tried to infiltrate into Venezuela's domestic affairs. I mean, just to put this in perspective for you, it's not that this is a covert backing by the United States of Karina. I mean, she literally is begging the United States military to invade her saying if the opposition wins, we will drop all 900 plus sanctions on Venezuela. If the opposition loses, we're going to keep the sanctions and we might do some more. How is that not election interference? I mean, it's the most insane thing. You know, Hillary Clinton got all bent out of shape when there was like a few allegedly Russian-produced memes on Facebook. How would she feel if the most powerful country in the world was saying, you know, if you win, we're gonna either ruin your economy or we're gonna save it based on if you win or lose? It's crazy. So, you know, this is nothing new. Of course, you know, several years ago, Trump administration. I don't really blame Trump for this. Of course, he was misled by Bolton and Pompeo, and you know, these sorts of figures, Abrams or whatever his name is. You know, these are the deep state psychopaths and sycophants, CIA, National Security Advisor John Bolton. They convinced Trump to, you know, recognize this Juan Guaido character. No one in Venezuela knew who this guy was. He went out in the middle of the street in Venezuela in a courtyard and he declared himself the president of Venezuela. The United States didn't even do a coup. They just said, we're going to recognize the new president and hopefully the opposition will unite behind him and then we'll be able to take over Venezuela again. They did that during the Trump administration. It failed. So now they're kind of back to the same old song and dance of doing these, you know, color revolutions through allegations of election fraud and then starting
Jackson, a minor correction. Color revolutions only applies to the former Soviet states. It's not a thing that applies to the Latin American states. It came around because of what happened after the fall of the Soviet Union. Please get your terms right. But otherwise, carry on.
That's not actually right.
Yes, it is.
Initially, are you speaking like you're a Bond villain, right?
Initially, it started with where you're saying, of course, it started in the Soviet Union. Later, the same terminology was used for many other color revolutions, including, but not limited to the Arab Springs. But anyway, do continue, Jackson.
Well, Jackson, please land. I want to go to some other speakers, please.
That's pretty much all I had to say.
Okay, thank you. We will come back to you. You are on the ground. It is important to hear your perspective. I'm not trying to shut you up, by the way. I would like to diversify. So, Vice Grad, since Jackson challenged the post that you made, and Sully said that it would be for balance, I think it is fair that we come to you if you guys had any thoughts about what Jackson had shared. If you're with us.
No, it is true that there was this one video that turned out to be air conditioners. However, there are other videos where you can see that colectivos, that other uniformed personnel are using force to enter these polling stations, and they're coming out with big bags. It seems a little bit suspicious that this is going on during such a contentious election. So it is quite clear that if we just look at the reports in general, we have polling stations where you have enormous amounts of opposition voters turning up, and these polling stations, they don't open for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. Then you have other cases where polling stations that should have closed remain open for hours and hours after they should have closed. It is clear that what is going on over there is nothing but electoral fraud. This is a tactic that has been used for many years now in Venezuela, in other allied states, whether it's Nicaragua, whether it's other states that are aligned with this global hydra that is now growing, going from the Islamic regime in Iran. Naturally, we're going to have people here who say that we have democratic elections in Russia, that we have democratic elections in Iran, in China, and so on. This is all ludicrous. We know that this is what is going on. And now, unfortunately, ahead of us is most likely a crackdown against the people, just like we saw in Ukraine in 2014.
Thanks, Vice President. Sorry, my the app is a bit glitchy. So we've got quite a varied stage actually. I saw Alyssa, you were getting quite, I think, passionate during some of the shares so far, and you are Venezuelan. So I'd love to come to you for your perspective about what was said, but also what you've seen in the past 24 hours.
All right, so I want to point out something in regards to what Jackson said. The economy in Venezuela is already ruined. El Bolivar, which is the currency, it's not even worth the paper it's printed on. And let me be very clear. I will be the next Secretary of State for Missouri, and I will be the next chief elections officer, and I can assure you that a machine can be hacked, and I can guarantee you and know for a fact that Maduro did not win this election. This was election fraud. They always make it look close, and this is a carbon copy of what happened to President Trump and to Kerry Lake in 2020. This is a 1776 moment for Venezuela. They are literally fighting on the street, taking down communist statues to get their freedoms back. So it goes to show you that you can vote communism in, but you have to fight it out. And this is a very valuable lesson for the people in America, for every single one of us living in the greatest country to ever exist.
Valentina, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
For two questions. First of all, are you aware that they have like the whole paper ballot receipts here? Because you were saying that, you know, electronic machines can be hacked, which I agree, but are you aware of that?
Well, fingerprints, it is included in their thing to be hacked.
What's that?
They have machines that have fingerprints on them that you can put your fingerprint in.
Yes, but I'm saying that they give you the paper ballot with your, you know, who you voted for on it. No. Okay, Valentina, I'm saying they give you the paper ballot receipt with your votes on it, and then you put it into a box, and then all of those are like double and or triple audited, depending on which polling station you're at, by the opposition. So are you aware of that?
Yes, but after it goes on the tally, that tally can be changed by anybody.
So you're saying that the opposition who's looking at the electronic and the paper ballots...
I'm saying that the voting machines are corrupt and they're compromising. We shouldn't even be having voting machines.
May I speak, please?
Okay, well, I had a second question for you too, but it seemed like you were unaware of that. So you said that...
Okay, Jackson, we'll circle back to you.
Wait. I just said I had a second
Addison,
question.
well, yeah, but you asked one. Like, it's not your stage, but go ahead.
You already take so much time, and I think that a Venezuelan has the right to speak before or better than you.
Okay, I'm just going to ask one more question, okay? I mean, I am the one in Venezuela right now. You're in Canada. So.
But you are not Venezuelan, and if you are in Venezuela right now and you are safe, it's suspicious
and
for
you're
me.
in Canada. Okay, so let's,
Yes, as a refugee. I came as a refugee because I was kidnapped by the regime in 2008. That's why I'm in Venezuela.
Maybe you deserved.
I'm in Canada right now.
Maybe you
Sorry.
deserved it. Okay, Valentina, I have one more question.
Yeah, really, I deserve it. You are the one who did not deserve to be here because you are talking on behalf of a regime who has thousands of people dead right now.
Okay, Valentina. So my second question for you is that you said that people are destroying the statues, the communist statues on the streets because they're fighting to get their freedoms back.
Yeah, they're revolting. The people are revolting. The government is armed, and the people are not even. They don't even have guns to defend themselves. So, what do you think they're going to do?
Well, my question is: do you think that Chevron's going to give them the freedoms, or the International Monetary Fund?
No, they need help from the United States. They need help from other countries to get their freedoms back.
From Chevron and the IMF?
From every country.
No, I'm specifically talking about the IMF that raped the entire economy of Argentina. You think they're going to help Venezuela?
Jackson, can you answer how well the Russians or the Chinese have helped Venezuela in the past 5 years?
I'm asking Valentina a question. Well, they've actually helped them quite a bit because when the 930 sanctions came down, Venezuela...
Jackson, you know Venezuela very well. Do you speak Spanish? Have you lived in the country more than 5, 10, 15 years to really understand what is happening there? People
No,
are
but I've watched for my entire life what the IMF, the World Bank, and the World Economic Forum has done to countries all across the world, destroying their economies. Yes, so why do you think that the World Economic Forum is going to come in and help Venezuela?
I don't think they're going to come and help, but the people are fighting. The people are fighting, Jackson. I know you're a communist. That's fine.
Who do you think is going to?
Okay.
Who do you think is going to take over
this is what we're gonna
Venezuela? You think it's going to be like the average people of America? No, it's going to be Chevron, the World Economic Forum, and the IMF. Why do you think that's good?
Well, it's way better than Maduro. That's for sure.
You think that selling off all the resources of Venezuela to the IMF?
They already are. They already did.
Same.
Okay, so I think what I want to do, guys, is I want to reset. What I want to do is come back to this point because I think it's important to explore this. I think Jackson has a fair point in that. Can we trust the global institutions of which I've worked for as much as we can trust a entity, an individual like Maduro who is unwilling or makes it difficult to relinquish power? Okay, we can talk about whether the West is better for Venezuela or the non-West, but I think that's something we should talk about a little bit later. What I want to do immediately right now.
She's from Venezuela. She can actually.
I will, Valentina, awesome. I will. But as co-host, I'm trying to keep the peace. So what I would like to do very quickly. Yeah, no, I'm not Sully, just to be clear. It's Piotr speaking, not Sully. No, I just want you to understand the difference. Sully has his perspectives, I have mine, and I don't want us to be confused because I want each person to represent their views. We work together. Sully has one opinion, and we work past those differences. But what we have right now is a situation which, for me, is it's a little bit volatile because I don't think enough people appreciate how much Latin American people like to protest, and that's a slight joke. But like, there's a lot of tension right now, and we've seen some burnings. I've also seen reports in the group that we are sharing information that there are some groups gathering around the main parliamentary buildings. So we will keep you up to date with the news as it comes through, like any major developments. But you wanted to let Alessandra speak, so we'll go to you, and then maybe we'll jump to Fiorella for balance, and then we'll come back to some other people. But Alessa, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's absolutely disgusting and disrespectful when someone has considered to have the right to say that someone who run away from a country is because they deserve to be kidnapped or they deserve to be tortured. In the last 15 years that I have been here in Canada, I was working on behalf of all political prisoners and advocating for them before the different government branches. I believe that even that you disagree with someone, you never deserve to be raped, to be electrocuted, or to be asphyxiated for months in a jail in any country in the world. When you make that kind of a statement that probably she deserved to be kidnapped in the country, is absolutely show who you are more than who I am in this moment. I don't know why right now, if you have the difference that a supposedly journalist like him, and you compare with a Spanish journalist who is detained right now, or a member of the Spain, a current member, parliamentarian from Spain, who was detained and who was put naked, and they cloned his phone. What kind of country are you talking about? It's not understand what is going on right now in my country. Yes, the machines are bi-directional. All the machines in Venezuela, they can be, any software can be changed or can be hacked. The one who denied that situation, is trying to sustain a narrative that is not real. When you have a country without separation of power, when you have a regime who controls the data of the voters, who deny the international neutral observers, who arrest the voters in the line of the polls, you cannot say that it's an unfair election. It's unrealistic making a statement in that way. And yes, the population vote. We fortunately have the copies of the acts of every poll right now, and we win with the 70%. And if Jack is right now in Venezuela enjoying, and he has the ability to speak freely in Venezuela is because he is part of the allies and he is related with the regime. That's all. And he is using an American to talk on behalf of a regime. Why we are asking for help? Because we are not armed. Venezuelans have no weapons. It's just civilians asking for help. Maria Corina is never asked to invite or ask for the United States to take the control. What else intervention we need in Venezuela when you have Cubans as ministers in the Maduro's government? When we have Cubans inducting and teaching torture techniques in my country. We have the proof and we denounced that before the International Criminal Court. We have the witnesses and the testimony of the victims. Are you laughing about the victims? They deserve to be tortured. A woman, a 15-year-old child, he deserves to be raped and tortured by the regime? Why? Why they deserve that? Yes, my people is now in the street defending what they choose, and we choose democratic representation. We vote for El Mundo. We didn't vote for the Chavistas. Even actually Barreto, who was part of the inner circle of Chavez and one of the leaders of the Chavismo, he is the one against Maduro right now. He's talking to the rest of the Madurists. Do not attack the population. We lost the support of the population. And he was like Rafael Ramirez, Tarek Al-Aissami, or all of them. He was one of them. And he's asking to the regime, leave the country and let the people be in peace. And what you say, absolutely what you say is false. In 1976, the oil company was Venezuelan and not controlled by anyone else. So we have Chinese getting mineral resources and commodities from my country. We have Ukrainian operating. What are you talking about of international interference in my country? My country is right now absolutely explode for every proxy in the world. What are you talking about? This is false. It's an absolutely double standard, what you say right now. We want to be free. We don't want anyone in our country, but we need help.
So, thank you, Lester, for that very passionate point. What I do want to remind people is that we try to sort of engage everyone on every point, even if it's difficult. But what happened 5 years ago, in 2019, was the last presidential election between Juan Guaido and Nicolas Maduro. And this result, and the other point I wanted to make is people wonder if I'm sounding like Batman. No, I just have a bit of a rough throat. Sorry about that. I'm not trying to sound like a Marvel character. So if my voice is a bit gruffly, that's why. But anyway, so 5 years ago we had the last presidential election, and this election was heavily disputed because of the belief that it was stolen again, that Maduro didn't want to give up the victory, and Guaido declared himself as president and tried to take the presidential oath in January of 2019. And this resulted in him having to flee the country, and basically the West supporting Guaido and non-Western countries supporting Maduro. And the two sides tried to negotiate some kind of power agreement or transition of power. I believe in Mexico were the last negotiations about a year ago or something like that, not too long ago. But it didn't account to much. And then this election is sort of the result of this continued power struggle with Maduro very much at the center. So that's a little bit of context. But what I'd like to do is go to, she's dropped out, unfortunately. Oh, no, she's with us. Fiorella, you had your hand raised earlier on, and I think you share a slightly different perspective to some of the other people on the stage. You're more aligned to Jackson, I believe. So what's your perspective on the situation? Fiorella, are you with us? Okay, I can't see Fiorella.
Hello?
Oh, you're here. Go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say I have studied elections all over Latin America I have seen elections in the United States. It's very hard to convince me that Venezuela's election was entirely unfair. And when, I forget what your name is, when you were asked about the election, when you were asked about the machines, you didn't have an answer for that. The machines are not connected to the internet. The machines cannot be hacked as long as they're not connected to the internet. What is valuable to know is if
Any
you, for
machine can be
example, have
hacked.
a machine in the United States that I've seen, the machines directly have access to Wi-Fi, access to the internet. This is why when Donald Trump questioned the election, I thought that was a valid concern because our machines are owned by a company of a smaller company, of a bigger company, of a smaller company, of a bigger company. These are companies that we don't know who they are, where they come from. And the machines, we're not allowed to look into them. We don't have public counting. We don't have one day to vote. We don't have a chain of custody. We don't have an ability to go and have a when you go into the poll, not only do you have an ID that you check, you literally have a biometric system, which is a thumbprint. Then you have also, when you leave, you also have to put your fingerprint. And when you go in, you have a selection that is an electronic machine, but it is not connected to the internet. So through every single process, you have on before, during, and after the election. This entire audit is something we don't have in the States. 54% of the machines are randomly audited. And all of the parties can participate in this audit. So for me, looking at this election and then looking at other elections in Latin America that are equally as good, almost, I would say Nicaragua is one of them, and I was there as well. And they do have more of a paper ballot process in smaller areas. But with this, you get a paper ballot and you get the electronic ballot that has to match at the end. So strictly speaking, from a technical perspective, I find it very hard to believe that there was fraud in this election when they have a clear process and when all of this goes to one place and when multiple people within each party are actually allowed to view this information. I don't really see how that could possibly be fraudulent. I actually did a thread on X. If you want to look at it, you can look at it, and you can challenge me on any of these points. You can come to me, and I can talk all day about this stuff because I've studied it thoroughly. And there's absolutely no way, in my opinion, that a machine can be hacked if it doesn't have internet access. If there is internet access, I can believe that. Now, the problem I have with a lot of the perspectives I've been hearing is, okay, well, you're Americans, what do you know about Venezuela? I'm Latin American as well, and I know exactly what the U.S. hegemony has done to Latin American countries. In fact, my family is Peruvian, and they suffered under the results of what is U.S. intervention. I mean, half my family hates communism, and it's because of a misguided understanding of what happened, of outside the situation. If you're going to be what I would call a vende patria and sell the country, not just to this so-called WEF, globalists, and blah, blah, blah. We're talking about the United States exploiting Latin American resources, exploiting our minerals, exploiting every rich resource we have, in Venezuela's case, oil and gold, and expropriating it for themselves. How is that something that you want to be prideful of? This election was a monumental moment between what people would want in terms of national sovereignty, in terms of being free from Western hegemony. I'm sorry to say that the world is moving towards that. The world is moving towards a direction of a multipolar world where you have all that means essentially is cooperation with multiple people in multiple countries without you having the directive of the United States' unilateral decision-making, unilateral bullying. And that's already changed. We're seeing dollarization, we're seeing so many things point in the other direction towards Russia, China, and the global south. You can have people in African countries literally saying, we don't want to be a part of this exploitation from the US, from the West. You have in Latin America a huge problem. After Bolivar liberated all the Latin American countries, there was still a sentiment of allegiance to the Spanish crown. Now we're going back here in history a little bit, but that sentiment of some sort of division in Latin American culture exists, where there are people who think that the US is so great, that Europe is great. You have that sentiment in Argentina. And look at Argentina now. Look at what Milei has done. People have been eating out of trash cans. You're not going to tell me that that's better. Okay, well, what brought it to that point? You can say it was socialism, but there hasn't been a socialist government there. There was a democratic type of government with socialist tendencies, with social, I would say, democracy, but it wasn't anything that was actually socialist. It was the IMF. The IMF, the allegiance to these loans, the debt that Argentina was under that has led it to this point. And then you look at other countries that have followed in that route. This is why Venezuela has cut diplomatic relations with these other countries, because they are going towards dependence on the United States. If you want to become Puerto Rico,
So for real, a couple of points that I'd like to.
well, that's up to each people of each country.
Fiorella, can you hear
But
me?
if that's not what the people of Venezuela want, and if their elections were valid, it's up to the people of Venezuela to do.
Fiorella, I don't think you can hear me or Piotr, but Piotr had a couple of questions for you. Go ahead, Piotr.
Yeah, thanks, Sully. No, I mean, we need to drop Fiorella though, and then not bring it back up. So what I want to do is ask for a quick question, and then I want to bring some, who was it, Valentina, I think, or Artsy Bolivia into the conversation, because I think they've got some perspectives which could counterbalance that. But what I think is important in this is that the IMF and the World Bank have been pretty sort of instrumental in this sort of Western order, and I think that Fiorella has a good point in that, that it does in debt countries, and this is part of the reason why so many countries don't trust it, so many people don't trust those institutions, and I think that's perfectly valid. What I think is different in this case is that some of the Venezuelans on the stage earlier have basically said that they don't care, or sort of they're more willing to deal with that system than they are with Maduro, which I think is quite interesting. The other thing is what you said, Sully, yourself earlier, which is about Milei, right? Javier Milei of Argentina is sort of this hardcore neoliberal guy who's introduced a bunch of policies that basically make the IMF, rub their hands together with glee, because it's making them impose austerity and economic reform, but it's not necessarily improving the Argentinian economy as good as we hoped. There's some statistics in the past few months that are suggesting that some of the policies he's introduced are actually making the country worse. So there's a lot of debate about this, and Latin America more broadly is going through a tough experience where you've got countries that are more right-wing, like Argentina now, but Brazil, which is more left-wing, or the red tide and the blue tide, as it's known in Latin America. But anyway, I can't see, unfortunately, Fiorella. So what I'm going to do is go to Will. I am going to be biased and go Will, because I think he's got a very different perspective, but I think he's quite well informed to provide us quite an interesting perspective. So, Will, thanks for joining. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what was said before, and then we'll jump back to Jack.
Yeah, thanks so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Will Freeman here, Council on Foreign Relations. And great to see there's 5,000 people on the call. Great to see that there is this attention, this care, and what's happening in Venezuela, because this matters so much for the country. This is a turning point, I think, not just for the country, but for the hemisphere. And the effects of what happens in the next few days in Venezuela will be felt everywhere. I mean, I think they'll be felt in the U.S. in a strong way, definitely in Colombia, Peru, the countries that have already taken in the majority of the Venezuelans fleeing their country over the last decade. So yeah, look, this is right. I mean, I respectfully, I see the situation very differently from the last speaker. And I'm trying, let's try to take a step away from left and right here. I'm not saying left and right don't matter. I'm not saying that we're in a period of politics that's post-left or post-right. Look, I think broadly left and right describes something in most parts of the world, Latin America included, But I think there's a special tendency to look at Latin America and just lock into one of these two, kind of put on these one or the other set of blinders. Either you're, a leftist who thinks left governments can do no wrong, or you're sort of, to make a little caricature of it, like a crazed anti-communist who puts on these right-wing goggles and, a right-wing government, anything they do is justified to keep the left out of power. So I just don't sympathize with either of those views. I think, let's look at Latin America objectively. What are the biggest issues in this part of the world? Inequality is, by some measures, the most unequal part of the world, and violence. Far and away, outside of an active war zone, the region that suffers the most homicides every year. So when I assess the Latin American government, I think I kind of come at it from the perspective of how do they do on inequality? How do they do on violence, on stemming violence? And how do they do on democracy? And so let's just look at Venezuela over the last 20, 25 years on those three variables, okay? So starting off with inequality. Look, I think no one would argue with the fact that under Hugo Chavez, there was a period when Venezuela was able to use very high oil prices to redistribute quite a bit of that oil revenue. And for a time, inequality varies under also center and right-wing governments in Latin America. We're also reducing inequality like Peru's. But look, Venezuela achieved something there. No one's gonna disagree with that. But all of those gains have been completely erased. And not only have they been erased under the latter half of Chavez and now under Maduro, Venezuela has become the outlier. I mean, this is the biggest economic disaster outside of a war zone in the entire world. Okay, think about the kind of economic chaos that had to unfold for 8 million people. 8 million. 1 in 5 people in Venezuela to flee the country. So I think that first off, we cannot say that this regime, as I think it's more appropriate to call it, Nicolas Maduro, has been good for the poor in Venezuela. There's no way you can argue that. 80% of people live in poverty. And you can say, okay, well, it's because of the sanctions, but it doesn't really take a much sophisticated argumentation to knock that down. I mean, the sanctions started to come online on the oil in 2017 through 2019. By that point, Venezuela's oil output had already crashed because the government had put everything under control of the military. So they put military guys in charge of oil, right? I mean, none of this was a recipe for actually lastingly decreasing inequality. Second, on violence. I think it's really important people understand here that there's a regime in Venezuela that's part civil, it's part military, run by a clique of people from the United Socialist Party, military allies, but they also have organized crime working with them to persecute dissidents, to exploit huge amounts of illegal gold mining in the Amazon in Venezuela, which both enriches Maduro and his friends. They send it to different gold buyers abroad. So organized crime is a huge part of this regime. Early on, Chavez Maduro handed over the prisons completely to what are called planes, so prison gangs in Venezuela. That led to Venezuela becoming at times one of the most violent countries in the world. And the violence has only recently gone down slightly because so many people have left. So I mean, that also means, look, most people who leave have nothing to do with crime, but it also means that some criminal groups leave. And that's why you have this gang, Tren de Aragua, spreading all over the hemisphere. So, okay, second, first, I see this as a government, disastrous government on inequality, disastrous on violence. And let's just talk about democracy last, and that's where I'll bring it into what we're seeing the last couple of days. So this is, a little clique of people that is terrified of losing power because they've committed so many crimes that when they do lose power, they will be facing, they currently face an investigation in The Hague, the International Criminal Court. There are Department of Justice charges against Maduro and members of his family for drug trafficking. And there's also a State Department bounty on the guy's head. And just think whatever you want of the U.S. or not. Like, it's not just the U.S. Again, this is an international criminal court. The costs for Maduro of leaving power are so high that I think that's really, that's part of the problem here, is that many people here want to see a negotiated solution. They think it's the only one viable, where Maduro essentially and his, inner circle would get some level of immunity or protection from prosecution, and then they agree to leave power and allow someone else for the first time in 25 years to have a shot at governing. But I think the real dilemma here is that the exit costs for them are just through the roof. They're extremely high, and even leftist governments who've at times been sympathetic, like Brazil's or Colombia's, they aren't. I don't think Maduro trusts them enough to actually think that they can guarantee a soft landing for him. So he sees himself and his military friends as the only people that can guarantee his fortune, his ill-gotten fortune, his also his ability to escape prosecution. And I think that's really the crux of that.
Will, do you mind if I interject very quickly?
Last point.
So Sully went back and forth with Jackson for a second.
One thing, the opposition, they've just taken over the airport in Venezuela. So
okay, thanks, Jackson. We'll look into that. I have been seeing some rumblings of strong resistance, shall we call it? But thank you for that. But Will, what I'd like to ask you a little bit is often and I'm going to take a position here which is anti-Maduro for the sake of argument, okay, audience, which is when we see hybrid regimes like this one, so governments that are pretending to be democratic but are not really, what they do is falsify their support by stimulating national sentiment. So think of the Falklands War. When the Argentinians tried to take the Falklands back, it was because the then at the time autocratic leader was, trying to, should we say, win popularity with the Argentinians because the economy was terrible. So my question to you is, has Maduro been trying to do the same over, say, Guyana? And remember about 6 months ago, there was a real fear that Venezuela might try to annex Guyana. So what's your thoughts there?
He tried, but he so spectacularly failed that, I don't think that's kind of not the main issue anymore. So what happened there? I mean, he announced this referendum. And to be fair, look, this is a position, even the opposition takes this position, that there needs to be some revision over who really should control, who, going way back, has a right to control this large swath of land called the Essequibo, currently within Guyana's national borders. But Maduro tried to get, he tried to whip up a nationalist frenzy around this, and he held a referendum, and nobody voted. And ironically, it was right after the opposition had organized its own primaries and had just amazing turnout that nobody thought they could actually, organize and facilitate an election on that scale themselves. So, I mean, I think he tried, but what this reveals is that it's just his regime is so bankrupt of any support. Where are you seeing the biggest protests right now? They're in working class parts of Venezuela. They're in working class parts of Caracas. You can just, simply search it. You can see the videos, the photos of former Chavista strongholds erupting against Maduro. So there's kind of nobody left to whip up with this national sentiment. And I think, Venezuelans right now, their biggest issue is not should they control a part of Guyana. Their biggest issue is can I get my family, can there be conditions in the country for my family to come back? I mean, that's been one of the opposition's main messages is we want to create a country that your family members who are refugees can come back to.
Let me just
I'm going to go to
let me just go to Jackson. Jackson, add in whatever you want, but just in addition to that, one of the important aspects is this. You, along with, I believe there was 800, but correct me if I'm wrong, journalists were asked to come to Venezuela to observe the elections. You have, for example, the U.S. National Lawyers Guild, who also monitored the presidential elections in Venezuela. They said, quote, the delegation observed a transparent, fair voting process with scrupulous attention to legitimacy, access to the polls, and pluralism. So the fact that Maduro invited all of you guys to observe the elections, does that show that he was concerned that there would be people who would immediately claim that the elections were fraudulent? And then the second question, in addition to that, is when you look at, for example, a lot of the posts that were made on social media, which were fake news, air conditioning has been posted as ballots being stolen, was his concerns proven to be right? And then when you look at even now where you said the airport being taken over, you saw the speech by the opposition leader, which many believe is CIA backed. Does that again demonstrate the concerns? And what else could he have done to stop this from happening?
Well, first, I'll just say that the last speaker, I believe it was the last speaker, came from the Council on Foreign Relations, which, the speaker sounded very charismatic, very reasonable, probably a nice person to hang out with. But if you don't know, the Council on Foreign Relations was created by the Rockefellers. Their board has been filled with the Rockefellers, elites from Coca-Cola, Goldman Sachs, Kraft, Barclays Capital, Gates Foundation, basically all the big billionaires that are screwing over the American people. And, he talked about we just care about the freedom of the people of Venezuela. No, that's a lie, because that's exactly what they told the American public during the CIA-backed coup in Iran in 1953. Iran, another oil-rich nation, which they toppled the democratically elected government of to try and steal its resources and assets. So this is the same old song and dance over and over and over again. They can change their names, they can change the faces, they can have new young hip people working for them, but it's finance capital, transnational corporations targeting those who are pursuing true sovereignty in the world. And you don't have to like communism You don't have to like socialism. And it really doesn't matter if they're communist or socialist states. You know, you could look at Iran, you could look at Venezuela, you could look at any other country that's fought for their sovereignty. If they have oil, if they have gold, if they have these things, they will be targeted by the banksters if they're not willing to give up all their resources for pennies on the dollar to the West. The second thing I wanted to say was, as for Alessa, you know, she was saying something about like, when is, you know, Maria Corina Machado, when is she ever called for military intervention in Venezuela? In a 2019 interview with the BBC, Ms. Machado, Corina Machado, calls on Western democracies to understand Mr. Maduro would only leave power in the face of a credible, imminent, and severe threat of the use of force by the United States or Western partners. That's what she said. So that's when she said it. 2019, BBC. She said it many other times. I can provide more resources if you'd like. And as for the last point, the elections, yes,
Jackson,
you know, and
Jackson, do you think a dictator is going to leave power willingly? Absolutely not. Do you think a dictator is going to leave power willingly?
Oh, he's not a dictator. I think that what we have are dictators in the United States.
What you can expect for a guy who is a representative of the Communist Party in America, and he's visiting and sending to governments or countries like Venezuela his narrative and his policies to say, oh, because capitalism, blah blah blah. He's using all those narratives from our to use our resources against us. What is the problem if Maria Corina is asking for help? What is the problem?
No, she's calling for military intervention in her own country. I was just in the middle. I was in the middle. I know I was in the middle. I know I was interrupted.
You mentioned
yeah, I was interrupted. I know, I was interrupted. So maybe just let me finish. Just let me finish.
How will we take the
Alyssa, just let me finish. I was
Jackson,
I know, I was interrupted.
Okay, let Jackson finish, then we'll come to you, and then I want to go to Raphael because he's been waiting to speak. Okay, thank you. Jackson, go ahead. Double mute, maybe. Double tap. Jackson?
You still got him muted. Now I'm just mute him.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Right, Jackson, go ahead.
The only other thing I was going to say was that you asked about the election observers. It wasn't just journalists that were observing. I mean, there was like business people observing the elections. There was political people from different political parties. There was former members of the European Parliament here. There was people from Africa, from almost every continent in the world. There was, journalists, as you mentioned. There was opposition leaders that participated as well that I got to meet and talk to. And all I got to say is that when it comes to the people that I've talked to here in Venezuela, the people that were actually voting, it's not that all these people are communists or socialists or anything like that. They believe in the revolution because they understand that the oil that flows beneath their feet is theirs. It's not the World Economic Forum's. It's not the IMF. It's not the State Department's. It's not, Chase's or Chevron's or Shell Oil's. And I don't really understand why someone like Valentina, who claims to be America first, is supporting
I agree with that part,
Maria. Wait.
I agree with that part.
I don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you support Maria or Council on Foreign Relations and the U.S. State?
Well, if I am battling a dictator, I'm going to call everybody to help me because I'm coming in guns blazing.
And are you also approving of her message and vision to potentially bring U.S. military intervention in the country and siphon off all of the resources for major transnational oil corporations and banks in the World Economic Forum?
Absolutely. The only armed people are the bad guys.
So you think the World Economic Forum should get all of the profits from the oil here?
Every other organization should get the fuck out. honestly, but he needs help. And the United States is helping Ukraine, it's helping everybody. If it's in the best interest of the United States, I would say do it.
Okay. We'll leave it at that.
All right, cool. Thanks, guys. Valentina, before I continue, I want to go back to.
Let me just say something real quick. I was born in Colombia and then in the USA, and I have seen the people of Colombia and the people in the United States be killed by the violent gangs from Venezuela. And Jackson, you're the perfect cheerleader for Maduro. You're the pretty boy that Maduro uses to sell communism, and you don't even speak Spanish. You don't know what it's like for the people of Venezuela. So I want to know, ¿cuánto te están pagando por esta farsa?
Eso sí.
And you're wait. Let me respond to that. So I'm the pretty boy. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll say you're the pretty girl that says America first, but secretly is supporting the CIA, the IMF, and the World Economic Forum. So that's what you are.
No, I support the people fighting for their countries.
You just told me that you
support.
You just told me that you support the World Economic Forum.
No, I do not.
Venezuela.
She didn't say that, Jackson. She didn't.
I support I support freedom. You support communism. That's the difference between you and I.
No. You just said you support the candidate backed by the IMF and the World Economic Forum in Venezuela.
That doesn't mean that you support
exactly. No, but everybody, Jackson, just like Maduro. Maduro has everything. He has China. He has all the communist countries.
He doesn't have the IMF.
But he has all the communist countries backing
him.
Let's be honest.
He's fighting the IMF. He's fighting the.
This is survival of the fittest.
No, he's not. Okay, no, guys. Right. Enough of this. I want to go to some Venezuelan voices. Jackson, appreciate your contribution. I want to go to some Venezuelan voices.
One more thing, sorry, Peter.
Housekeeping. Because I want to speak.
I just want to say Anya Parmpill is going to request in about 15-20 minutes to join.
Okay, thank you. Alyssa, over to you, and then I want to go to Raphael, and then Will for right of reply, and then
Thank you so much, Prior. The thing is, let's dismantle all the lies from this gentleman that he's openly supporter of the communism. First of all, I want him to explain that the oil industry in Venezuela is absolutely dismantled for the lack of maintenance right now. We went from 3,000 barrels per day to less than 500. We don't even have the capacity to cover the internal needs of the country. Now we are receiving oil from Iran. This is the first thing. The Chavismo destroyed the Venezuelan oil industry, who was in some time the second best company in the world. Third, Venezuela's regime owns millions and millions and millions of dollars to China right now. The Communist Party of China owns Venezuela right now. What he is talking about the World Economic Forum is we are under the control of the evil people in the world. We have miners, illegal companies, even from South Africa, exploiting the natural resources in my country. What are you talking about of the World Economic Forum and those groups? If Maduro gave my country, my natural resources to everyone, everyone is taking a piece from Venezuela. And you try to promote that, Maduro is already dealing with those groups. What made you say or believe that he's not trading with them, with Russia? Where do you think that is going the Venezuelan oil or the Venezuelan gold that is going to the hands of Erdogan in Turkey? And you are defending. We know what is happening with all the situation with the club boxes and Alex Saab and everything. Everyone is taking something from Venezuela. And you say we have La FARC, FLN, we have Hezbollah training in Margarita. They are using my country as a fridge, and then my country is giving our citizenship and sending them for the MFR. They are funding terrorists from Venezuela. And you are concerned about the web. We did not support the web. What you say that? You try always create a fallacy and a narrative. I don't believe that you care about the Venezuelans. You are there just to promote your ideology, and you don't give it anything about the Venezuelan population. As the saying, Maduro, he doesn't care. They don't care about the population. They use us just as an exchange in a crisis. And the Venezuelans, we say enough is enough. My people in the country, inside our country, say enough is enough. And in the future, when we are free, nobody like you who promote communism will be welcome in our country. No more you want to be there. Stop spreading false information about what we want or what Venezuelans deserve. We want to be free as Cuba and.
Thank you for that. All right. So, what I want to do is go to Rafael, because we haven't heard from you for a bit. And then I do want to go to Mariango, if I'm saying that even remotely right. Sorry, Mariango. Rafael, go for it.
Oh, man, where do I start? Look, first and foremost, I will say it has been really, really hard for me to hold my tongue. I respect a lot of the points that have been made by Will, by Alessa, by Valentina, just to try and keep the decorum or maybe the lack thereof. I'm trying my best, but when you have comments being thrown around like the one that Alessa regularly pointed out, where let's not forget that Jackson Hinkle, you literally told Alessa, maybe you deserve to be kidnapped. It's really disappointing to hear not just that, but also the straw man arguments that are being used to discredit people like Will just because he works for the Council on Foreign Relations. While you're attacking his credentials instead of the valid points that he's making about the reality in Venezuela, you're clearly deviating from the discussion. The other thing that is really disappointing to hear is that the loudest pro-Maduro voices, the loudest ones, more often than not, happen to be non-Venezuelans who know very little, next to nothing about the country's culture or the language. I'm sorry, but like most of you who support this regime, you can't tell me how many states there are in Venezuela. You can't tell me if you talk about the oil so much, you probably couldn't tell me where the vast majority of the oil actually comes from. Meanwhile, the Venezuelans are the ones who are actually the ones that are clamoring and speaking out against the regime, the ones that are protesting in the streets, 3 of which died last night. They're the ones that are talking about the grim reality. This idea that opposition leaders participated in the national electoral process, by the way, is false. It is absolutely false. They tried to get in and they weren't allowed in. There was incontrovertible video evidence of them trying to get in and they weren't able to do so. I don't know how you say that you spoke to them and that they were telling you all these nice deep stories about how great it is to live in Venezuela and how wonderful the regime is when you don't speak Spanish. How the hell can you speak to them if you don't speak Spanish? And then you talked about international observers, the Carter Center. You mentioned.
She speaks English.
Fuck you, please let me speak. You said that Jimmy Carter speaks glowingly about Venezuela and how they have the best elections in the world. Then why is it that the Carter Center called for an immediate publication of detailed results at the polling level? Why is it the United Nations, I don't know, you talked about the WEF, you talked about the State Department, but you haven't talked about the United Nations, you haven't talked about their Security General and other international bodies, International Criminal Court that have called against the regime's crimes against humanity. These are not Western aligned organizations. They're just not. Right? And the other problem that I'm hearing is this logical fallacy that supporting Maria Corina Machado equates to supporting the IMF and transnational banks and the State Department. Again, another logical fallacy that is a diversion from the real issue at hand. I cannot tell you how many times this has to be explained. Maria Corina Machado, who was disqualified for money, let people be clear about this. She was not the candidate because she was disqualified by the regime. She literally tried to speak 30 minutes ago and they cut off the lights from the building she was speaking at and they didn't let her speak. It was Edmundo Gonzalez who was able to squeak by and had his name on the ballot. Again, Maria Corina Machado was not a candidate. They both represent the unified democratic opposition within Venezuela. Their support does not come from quote-unquote the West. It comes from the Venezuelan people who showed up in droves in a 60% turnout, despite the fact that there was mass suppression that is on video, incontroversial. So you cannot call bullshit on this. All of this underscores the legitimacy of the opposition's claims and of the international community's concern for free and fair elections in Venezuela. So for God's sakes, let's not lose sight of the fact that this election is about the Venezuelan people's desire for democracy and for a Venezuelan or for a better future. Trying to tie this to unrelated entities like the IMF and the State Department only distracts on real issues and just shows that all you want to do is slam dunk the West. You do not give a fuck about the people of Venezuela.
I'll pass it over to Jackson to respond. Go ahead, Jackson.
Well, that was a very impassioned speech. Great job. For some reason, when you were speaking, I was like, this guy sounds so insincere with his talk about democracy and freedom.
Stop making it personal, Jackson. Talk about the topic,
let him finish. Go ahead, Jackson.
No, Sully, I'm not going to have him.
Well, this is actually it's actually a policy.
No, Sully, I'm going to make it very clear.
Wait, this is actually
He will talk about the topic.
He's responding well to
Raphael.
personal attacks on him as well.
No, Sully, I'm going to make it very clear publicly.
You will not be hosting this
He
space
will
again.
talk about the
You will not
topic.
be hosting. Enjoy this last time.
No, I'm not. No, Sully.
Enjoy this last time you
No, Sully.
Go on, Jackson.
Sully. Sully, do you want me to make public the problems that you have?
Well, let's bring it on. What problems are you talking about? Let's bring it on.
Okay.
Peter, what was that?
Right.
What was I about to say?
Because that's halfway shit show because you're pissing.
Yeah, you're just destroying the space. You're embarrassing yourself. Like you're the first host to ever do this on any space.
No, you're
literally
yourself
destroying the
you can't
space.
speak
Embarrassing yourself.
You don't give a
You're
fuck
crazy
about
shit.
the
You're terrible.
Venezuelans. You don't give
know
a
what
fuck
you're talking
about the
about.
topic.
You're
You
terrible.
know fuck all about
You don't know what you're doing.
Wait, okay, no.
You give.
Can I speak?
You don't let die and
No,
you
stop.
actually have no one even go to your spaces
Shut
because you're
the
embarrassed and
fuck
you've been begging to come on these spaces.
Shut
You
the
beg
fuck
me
up.
and message me and beg me and
No,
beg
you
me
don't
and beg
do
me and
anything
beg
but
me and
talk
beg me and
about
beg me and beg me and beg me and beg me.
You don't do
About
anything other
to
than
spaces
bringing
and then I'll
random
throw
shit
you a
that
little
we
bit
don't
like a
know
little
about
beggar.
anything.
And now you're on this space.
Okay.
You this opportunity.
And you
So
talk
know
about
your role
spaces
and
based
know
on
your
numbers.
place.
No,
Know your role and know your
you
place.
to talk about places.
You guys.
You to talk about spaces.
Holy shit. You guys.
Jackson, talk to the issue. Not
Okay,
Raphael.
what was I?
If
You
do
don't
that
even know what I was
I
about
will
to
lose.
say.
Stop muting people, Sully. Jesus Christ.
I was halfway through a sentence. Do you know what I was about to say? Because you interrupted me. I was halfway through a sentence. Peter. Hello.
It's fine. I don't want you to attack Raphael.
Oh, I wasn't attacking him. I was halfway through a sentence making a point. So do you know exactly what I was going to say? Or did you just interrupt me like a prick? Okay.
No, I interrupted you because you're a prick attacking Raphael.
So what I was saying was it was such a level of insincerity. It reminded me of all the Zionists I debated. And I had to look at his account. Turns out he's a Zionist, so it all made sense. Now, to get back to the question of Venezuela, so first of all, this Alyssa woman, she said something about how Venezuela is taking oil from all across the world and stuff like that. Well, I mean, you're leaving out like all of the context. So, Alyssa, do you know why? First of all, do you know what type of crude that Venezuela is taking in from around the world and why? Can you explain that?
Say that again.
Do you know what type of crude oil that Venezuela is taking into their country, and do you know why they're doing it?
We have the different kind of oil in Venezuela, and one is the heavy oil that we cannot process right now from the Orinoco for the issue that we have with Cisco right now. And secondly, it's all the refineries. They are not working because 30,000 employees from the PDVSA, they were kicked out from the country. There is not technical operative for the infrastructure right now in Venezuela. We have a very issue of production because we don't have people prepare, and the lack of maintain and the cannibalism of the refineries reduce the capacity of my country, not because the sanction, and don't come with that narrative, because the worst sanction in Venezuela is the Maduro regime.
Okay, so when did Venezuela first have problems with accessing oil inputs, and when did they start looking to countries like Iran and Turkey, for example, for these oil inputs like light crude or these chemicals?
I know where you want to go, and was before 2008, even previous with the sanctions, when Chavez killed the chicken of the golden eggs. Is they destroy the whole industry, because at the beginning, before 2008, when we received $160 per barrel, is when Maduro was very rich, and he buy and the support of everyone. But after they destroy our industry for the last opinion, that is when that happened. It's not thanks to the sanctions, because the sanctions start to, actually, the most ridiculous thing in those things is sometimes sanctions are just there, you have to behave. But in the country who they actually pay for the oil that they purchase from my country, the only one who pays is United States, because the rest of the country, they give it for free, like Cuba.
What? Okay, so you didn't really answer the question. The question was, when was the oil industry very negatively impacted? It was like 2017 to 2020. This was when you had like gas lines all across Venezuela. There was this crisis going on, and it's because U.S. sanctions that were initially applied in 2017 hampered Venezuela's ability to access oil inputs on the global market so they could turn their heavy crude into usable light crude. Then just let me finish. So then Venezuela decided, okay, well, we have this problem. What are we going to do? So they start negotiating with countries like Iran, who can provide light crude and these vital input chemicals to actually make their heavy crude in Venezuela usable. Iran sent ships of these inputs, these oil inputs, to Venezuela. And guess who tried to stop those ships from coming to Venezuela? The United States had naval patrols to try and block the ships from Iran to actually dock off of Venezuela to bring those oil inputs to the country so they could have oil. Eventually, Iran wasn't. Wait, just let me finish. Let me finish. I'll let you talk for a while, and I gave you plenty of time to talk. Okay.
Thank you.
Wait. I didn't let you talk. Okay. So Iran eventually got these ships in with the oil inputs, and then within a year, Venezuela was able to magically double their oil production again. How incredible is that? Who would have thought? Oh my God, the U.S. sanctioned them. No oil because they didn't have access to inputs. Iran came in, saved the day. They did trade with Iran. Iran gave them the chemicals, and then they doubled their oil production again. Who would have thought? Oh my God, it's amazing.
All right.
Okay. There is besides, I will answer him, but there is an announcement that the Communist Party in Venezuela declared that was rigged election, that Maduro did not win. The Communist Party in Venezuela released a statement right now. Okay, about the what he's talking, the victimization thing about the sanction and the evil United States and the poor Venezuela. If we said that the principal source of income from Venezuela is the oil industry, this is a lie. Venezuela is a criminal state. They find a way to jump the sanction with criminal activities like gold trafficking, oil trafficking, people's trafficking, and drugs trafficking. And they don't, the majority of the and the only ones who are rich right now in Venezuela and they improve their economy if all the inner circle, the 1% of the population who are part of the Chavista apparatchik that we have right now in my country. If you want to pretend to come with me with that narrative, the evil war who is sanctioned and the industry, if they are with sanctioned, how they get the resources to restore the oil industry. That is an absolutely, you can't even sustain your narrative. And the thing is that we are not longer as an oil industry producer. We cannot even cover the internal in the middle of the ocean. It's not safe and it's not legal. This is how they are getting the oil. The other thing that is doing Venezuela is sending oil to Cuba, and Cuba, which is not a producer, is selling our oil and get the profit. And that is the thing that you don't want to speak about, right? All the partnerships, like countries with Cuba, who are doing that kind of negotiation with our resources, have ministers and members from the Cuban regime controlling in my country, has Iranian operatives operating and living and be part of the government of Maduro. And you dare to talk about international interference in my country is because it's nice, because they say that they are communists or Islamic Marxists. It's nice that they are in Venezuela and not Democrats and freedom. Seriously. And Jackson, you are a communist. Why we will believe in what you said?
Okay, I just have one question about what you said. So it sounded really scary the way you put it, which include light crude, I guess, for their oil, for their heavy crude, so they can actually make it into a sellable product. But you made it sound really scary. You said Venezuela is getting this oil by way of gold trafficking with Iran and with countries like Turkey. So my question to you is, what is so scary and or illegal about two sovereign countries doing trade where one provides gold and the other country provides much needed oil for the other country? What is so illegal or scary about that?
Why is so illegal if Venezuela wants to trade with another sovereign country like the United States? I return the question to you. Why is good with Iran and it's not good with the United States?
I'll explain it because you chose not to answer my question because you don't have an answer, but I'll explain mine. So the reason you asked me a question. Let me answer your question. Let me answer your question.
Because you're stating that I don't know the answer. It's because my answer.
Wait. You asked me a question, so let me answer.
Okay, Jackson, answer her question. Alicia, you respond, and then I want to go to her.
Okay, I'm gonna answer the. On your part.
Thank you, Solari. I'm apologies for butchering the names. And Peter, I gotta go for some commitment. Jackson, stop being Mother's puppet. Since you're Venezuela, you're puppet.
All right, stop being the IMF puppet. Stop being the World Economic Forum puppet. You're not America first. You're not America first.
Gracias, Valentina. Próxima. Ciao. Okay, Jackson. Go ahead.
Okay, to answer your question, and by the way, Anya Farmville just joined, so you should bring her up. She's the premier expert on Venezuela, I think. But to answer your question, Alyssa, you said, why is it that I think it's okay for Venezuela to do trade with Iran, but I don't think it's okay to do trade between Venezuela and the United States? Well, the answer is because, and Anya can expand upon this, but the answer is because when Venezuela does trade with Iran, they're giving a fair amount of gold in return for a fair amount of oil inputs that allows Venezuela to then sell the oil to other trade partners. When you look at the United States, what they do is, it's not really about fair and open trade. The United States will, they'll manufacture a political climate where they can input the leader, which is the leadership that is currently backed by Maria Corina Machado.
And then they'll tell her, if you don't give 99% of your oil revenue, again, because this is how it used to be in Venezuela, again, to these transnational